Welcome to the Tuesday, November 15th special called session. Mayor Gertz is out of town, so as Mayor Pro Tem, I am taking his place tonight. Clerk, will you please read the roll?
Davenport.
Here.
Lane.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Benson. Hool.
Here.
Edwards.
Here.
Thornton.
Here.
Hamby.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, great. This is a special called session to consider 3 points of business. There are agendas outside if anyone needs one. We're going to take public input now for anyone on these 3 items, 1, 2, and 3 on the special called session agenda. We have anyone? Oh, come on up. Yes. Yeah, yes, come up here, and the rules of the commission state that the public may speak once during the session for
3 minutes.
3 minutes, and the light will turn green and then orange at the 30 seconds, so.
Thank you very much. So there are two.
And fill out the card,
Fill out the card.
whatever card.
Okay.
The card is out there on the counter out in the hallway.
You can do it after.
You can do it afterwards.
Thank
Okay,
you.
good. Yes.
Well, my name is Dominique Lehman. I'm here in Athens now going on 10 years. I'm not sure which of the 2 they are because 2 look like they might represent what I'm here for. But this is regarding the assistance for rental assistance to prevent, I think.
Right, item 2.
That's right, thank you. So the reason that I was invited and asked to come and possibly speak is because I represent, I guess, a demographic that is not always in need of help. But I find myself in need of help. And I know that there is this, today there's supposed to be a vote, and I have spoken to a few people, a few of the commissioners, and they said that it would be voted for, not against. So I wanted to say thank you for that. Excuse me. But also ask that everybody, also take into consideration what might be coming down the pipeline in '23. We know economically what's happening, all over the world. And so naturally, we will be affected by that here too. Not that one would continually need help, but I want to say thank you for considering it and approving it, although I don't know that 100% until it's, signed on the dotted line, but presumably it will be. So you are helping people like myself, not just people who might be like laying out in front of the doorway. You know what I mean? So thank you. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Dominique. Good. Can we get some of those cards up there at the podium as well from someone? We'll see if they appear. I think there are usually some at the podium. Can we go ahead and get then a motion from back here to go into special call session?
Move to suspend the rules.
Right, thank you.
Second.
Okay, that's a motion from Commissioner Hool and a second from Commissioner Thornton. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We're going to be then moving into the new business, and the first one is a release of purchase option at 115 Kentucky Circle.
Motion to approve.
Second. My
Okay.
colleague got it.
Good, you guys are fast here. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that was quick. Motion passes. And we'll be moving on to the emergency support of the ARPA-funded eviction prevention program.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any comments from Commissioner?
Nope.
Commissioner,
No, I have no comment.
is there anyone want to speak in opposition?
Nope.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Commissioner Hool?
I have a question for staff. The facts and issues 1116 and the attachment show 19 households that are kind of already identified as in the pipeline, but then AFDC also indicated more recently that there may be more. So I wanted to clarify, A, if we have an idea of how many more, and B, does our action tonight, if we're just approving the agenda item as written, enable staff to not only help the 19 that are identified, but any others that may be identified for whom there's adequate documentation?
So thank you, Commissioner Hool. That was going to be my comments as well. We've recently learned, as you have, that it could be more, as many as 50 or more. So staff is committed to helping as many as they can, you know, up to and including these 19. We may have to return to you in a future session to seek additional funding or a partner to assist.
And so we would only need to vote again if we run out of funding that's already been allocated to the EPP.
Well, let me be clear about that. And there's a good bit of money that's left unspent. The problem here is that I believe EPP had 2 full-time folks and a part-time folk. I mean, our staff's, we can't assume their responsibilities. So we're going to do the best we can to serve a number of folks, but we may have to come back for further direction on the rest of them. That's about as far as I can break it down for you right now.
Okay.
We can't take over this program. We don't have the staff capacity. This was meant to kind of fill the gap for a certain group of people, and now we're learning there's more. So we're just I can't respond to that now other than we're committed to making happen what's in the existing agenda item. As we learn more, we'll come back to you and get further direction.
Any other questions from the body? We all ready to vote on this?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it, and item 2, the emergency support passes. We're moving on to agenda item 3, North Downtown Athens development, some funding.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve from Commissioner Hamby and a second from Commissioner Thornton. Would either of you like to, would you like
It's in
to?
the agenda report. We're good to go.
Okay.
And just for people that are listening, and I guess I need to ask Manager Williams this. We realize that this is a unique situation as far as the economy is going right now, as far as interest rates and construction costs, and this is probably more of the unusual happening than actually happening. Sir?
Well, certainly construction escalation and rising interest rates have caused the original plans to be altered as far as how much was invested and by whom. I will note that this final $4 million represents the last of the $11 million of the affordable housing, as you have a pending vote on the accelerated RFP that was recommended by the advisory committee on December the 13th.
So, and I guess this is, we have a lot of projects on the table. Should we be expecting these kind of requests as we move down the road? Is this just an isolated case? And if these are going to be items that are going to come to us to look at increases, do we have a plan as we move forward?
Well, so part of this is that I believe there's at least 8 projects that this government has committed to building for other, or investing in with outside partners. So each deal is a little bit different depending on who it's structured with. I think this is well beyond the comfort zone of both parties. The reason to continue down this path is not to lose the low-income housing tax credits, which would expire in the very first of the new year, which would then pretty much doom the entire project to at least delay. But the per unit cost now is well in excess of what we ever expected.
Thank you. Commissioner Houle?
What is that per unit cost at this point?
It's in the mid 400,000s.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I see we have leadership from the Housing Authority here. If it's possible, Madam Chair, to invite them up to speak. I kind of have a couple questions to feel confident that what we're doing today moves us in a direction that actually gets us to the point we all want to be in the future.
We can do that. Is there someone from the Housing Authority who could address these questions? Could you come to the mic, please?
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, and I guess, Mr. Parker, if you could just speak to, I mean, you know, originally, I think we all hoped that DCA would come through and then we'd have this money available to do something else with, and now we're back with this request to use up the last of the ARPA money, the last of the money we've really got here. And we're still in just phase one, you know, just putting everything in the ground and building one building. And I have a fear within me that it seems unclear how we get through phases 2, 3, 4, and 5 when there's no more money really on our end to put toward it. And all that's going to probably have the same issues that we've been running into up to this point.
Okay. Well, first of all, excuse me, thank you for the support that you have offered us so far. It's absolutely essential for us to be able to close and close on time. This is an extraordinary set of circumstances. When we approached you last spring for GAP, for helping us fill the gap sat at a particular point. We applied to you, we applied to DCA. DCA did not reply back and make their final determinations until October of this year. In the meantime, construction costs went up over 200 basis points and added a significant new amount of money to the bottom line of the project, and construction costs continue to go up. We're in a 40-year high on inflation right now in America, something that nobody could have possibly predicted when we began this project. Just as a reminder, we applied for tax credits more than 2.5 years ago. And we began our conceptual presentation to this board 4 years ago. And the cost 4 years ago and the cost 2.5 years ago when the tax credits were originally awarded is completely different than what the reality, the economic reality that we're dealing with now. This is not this project. This is all over America that this is happening. This is happening with multiple projects in the state of Georgia, and I'm in conversation with folks across the USA. This is a problem that our country literally is going to have to deal with. If we are able to fill this gap at this point in time, we should be able to close by January 5th, and that will lock the costs for this particular phase, and all costs after that point will be considered change orders to the construction contracts that will be signed, and all of the financing contracts will be executed at that point. And all change orders will be at the expense of the development team entirely from that date going forward. So this allows us to get there. And as you read in your packet, the reason that there's a January 5th deadline is in order to try to hold down those costs while the decision was being made on what level of funding the state would supply. We purchased a rate lock that will save us millions of dollars because after January 5th, we lose that rate lock. We calculate that more than $2.5 million of additional cost will click in because of the loss of the lower interest rates that we negotiated. As to where phase 2, 3, 4, and 5 go, we will be solving that problem as we go. We'll do that in a variety of ways, and we'll be working on that going forward. I think this is going to frankly take a national solution because this isn't just this project, this is all across America. I believe the federal government will have to change the level at which they fund low-income housing tax credits. We'll need to be taking a look at design changes that we can make going forward. These buildings have already been designed and bid. We have negotiated, just to give your mind some comfort, we have negotiated bid to the lowest bidder. We've negotiated with that lowest bidder going forward. They will be taking some cost savings incentives. That is, we put cost savings incentives in there so that hopefully we can continue to drive the cost down if, in fact, costs begin to moderate from inflation. We are pre-buying materials in order to lock costs for materials. We already committed to a crucial material even before we have the construction contract signed by the Athens Housing Authority. We did that commitment in order to make sure that we could hold pricing down. The construction contract will be 24 months. To the extent that construction pricing comes down during that time and there are available savings by the time we get to the end, then it is our intention to repay those savings to the ACC and restore those to local government because of your support going forward from here. So those are just some of the measures that we're taking in order to try to reduce the cost and fill the gap. We were able to fill some more of the gap. This is so important, and the tax credit providers across America understand how difficult this is. We convinced our tax credit advisor to supply some additional funds and to move up the payment of those funds earlier in the project, which further reduced the construction costs, interest costs that we'll incur going forward. So this is an exceptional situation, but your support will allow us to close on January 5th, move this project forward, and hopefully begin construction of the vertical component, I think in the spring. Is that correct? Late spring, Charlie?
Start of the winter.
Yeah.
With the vertical.
Yeah. So that's where we are. Any other questions I hope that gave you some
Well,
sense of what's going on?
All that matches a lot of the
Commissioner
information in the packet that helps me feel confident in getting through phase one. Phase
Yeah.
one gets us a lot of stuff on the ground in one building.
Well,
And-
it's multiple connected buildings, but yeah.
You know, I guess I'm thinking if phase 2 through 5 is contingent on the federal government changing things, I have a hard time believing that that's going to happen on the timeline that we're talking about trying to get.
Well,
through
during the
phases 2
last
through 5.
economic crisis, when the mortgage rate crisis hit, we experienced something similar in the low-income housing tax credit world, and the federal government provided additional riders and additional dollars and TCAP dollars and a number of things that were designed to help fill those gaps and move the project forward. So I believe that we're not going to just simply stop building affordable housing in America because of the economics and the inflation that's going on. I believe this will be addressed by a combination of inflation will eventually moderate, interest rates will stabilize, and additional resources will be provided, and we'll be working as a team to try to fill those gaps and create the next phases.
So to put it plain, how confident do you feel that the team is going to be able to see through the subsequent phases if we secure this deal?
I talked to our business partners earlier today, and we were talking about this ourselves, and they pointed out they are in this for the long haul. They consider this not just a business decision, but that they made a commitment to this community, and they are going to be working tirelessly to try to solve all these problems going forward. And we'll have more time to solve them because we won't be applying at the earliest until a year from now for the next round of tax credits, which gives us several years to solve some of these problems moving forward. So I feel confident that these problems will get solved. How quickly they will get solved, I can't speak to because I can't predict when the crisis will moderate and when the opportunities for other sources of funding will arise, but I'm confident that we will eventually solve these problems and the project will be built out. Now, that's me personally and not a personal guarantee. It's just my experience after years and years and years of doing affordable housing is we will not totally shut down the creation of affordable housing in the United States of America for an indeterminate long period of time.
If I may ask one more question, it's for the manager, actually. I appreciate you answering these.
Thank you.
I noticed in history number 46 that the advisory committee is going to meet after we vote tonight. And I guess I'm just curious, usually the advisory committee meets to give us a recommendation of yay or nay or some kind of modified suggestion. What are we asking the advisory committee to advise us about if they meet after tonight?
Well, and we should have amended that. As you'll note on the very first page of the agenda item, it says consideration on December the 6th. So we thought we had a couple of extra weeks, but Rick had talked to the mayor and decided that from an urgency standpoint for closing, to go ahead and put it on for tonight. Assistant Manager Jones did send out an email to the group letting them know of that and share any concerns with him about that. So that's the answer to your question. I also have other points to make, but I'll defer to the other commissioners first.
Are there any, Commissioner
I
Thornton?
think that I'm going to defer to the manager because what I'm going to say may be not directly connected to this. I will say that I did talk to one of the partners today and basically confirmed that what Rick is sharing with us now. I think that this project is going to move forward. It's going to have some lumps and bumps, but I did make a call myself with the concern of the presentation tonight. So I felt good after, well, I felt better after that conversation. So I'll turn it over to you and then I'll make my comment.
Okay.
Manager Williams.
Commissioner Hull, you and I have not spoken on this, but you asked a lot of the same questions I asked when this issue came up and we met in person. And I too, you know, the original SPLOST 2020 affordable housing, you know, project was about $44.5 million, I think, and 39 of that was dedicated for the Bethel project, which I think, as far as the amount of funds that we've spent from a SPLOST perspective, and then ARPA on top of that, you know, we're in probably at or beyond that 39 million investment, which, to your point, was meant for multiple phases. So I think at this point, and I haven't done an in-depth pro forma analysis, but we're probably about, including the 18 million to buy the property, about 50% equity in this deal, and the developer's probably at 3 or 4% perhaps, which, you know, I think we had all envisioned that there would be funds to spend on the subsequent phases, which has been eaten up by escalation and other issues. And so what I had said to the partners was, well, you know, the proportion of our equity in the deal versus the developer's equity in the deal obviously can't be replicated in phase 2 because we've spent our money. And so the partnership's response to that was, well, number one, everything consistent with what Rick shared, that they're going to hope for more tax credits to be invested in subsequent phases, which would require some changes in the federal government. The other thing that they said that those phases may have to be smaller, and so instead of there being 5 phases, if there's less equity, less resources, then you may not build as many units at a time. But Rick and the partners said they're committed to seeing the build out over time.
Correct. And the reason, just you mentioned the question about timing, the reason for timing is that we've had to submit to Freddie Mac for the permanent loan underwriting just this week. In fact, we submitted it yesterday and got it in their hands for a deadline because they have backup deadlines that they have to have it so many days before closing. So backing up from January 5th when the rate lock expires, that puts us right at this time period. So that's why we're to you early. And you need to know also that we came to local government as our last choice. We went back to DCA. We lobbied hard with the commissioner and with staff because this is a unique community-driven project. It's not your normal developer-driven low-income housing tax project, and we argued hard for that. And we also, after we got a negative response there, we came to local government and asked the mayor to also contact the commissioner, and he did so. And the commissioner understands, he knows that this is a problem across the state, but he feels duty and honor bound to, if he were to do something, to open it up to all the other projects that are struggling as well. And that would take such a long period of time that would not get us to our January 5th rate lock closing date. So that's when we came back to local government. We did not want to be here before you this evening. It is our last choice. We understand that this is a significant ask, but if the project is going to move forward at this point in time, it's going to require some additional support, and that's why we came to you. We're committed to doing everything we can to make this project work in all successive phases as well.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Commissioner Houle?
Last question. This is kind of a history lesson question. I'm not sure if it's for Manager Williams or you, Mr. Parker, but I see in the IGA, we have this ground lease for $600K, and it seems that seems like a low amount to me. I'm thinking about all the money going out and what money's coming back, and there's some issue with Novogradic, however you pronounce that. Could someone help enlighten me as to why that's the amount we've landed at?
Manager, do you or Judd want to take that, or do you want me to respond?
We, as you know, we got Nova Grant to do us an appraisal, and they came back with $600,000 being the land lease amount. We tried to work with them to get them to look at, we thought it was low as well. I mean, we think the appraisal is legitimate. Nova Grant's a nationally known appraisal company that does these type of appraisals. It's not just some local appraisal company. The reason it's low is because it takes into account that these units cannot, one of the reasons it's low is because it takes into account that these units cannot be leased at market rate. So there's a restriction, and that affected the value. However, we still thought it was low and asked them to go back and look at certain factors to try and increase it. Subsequently, though, as we begin to learn, I mean, if we increase the land lease payment, it's just going to take more money from the authority and the partner, and it's not going to really help us. So I think we do have a legitimate appraisal. I think we should move forward with the appraisal we have for that reason.
Now, where in the future, it might make a difference is when, as the future phase is envisioned, that perhaps a private developer would develop portions of the property. And so that's something we'll need to pay attention in the future if we make it to subsequent phases.
And did you say we hired Novogradic, or?
We did, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It was hired through local government, and we were bound by what the appraiser says. We're not the appraisers.
Right.
I have a lot of expertise, but appraisal is not one of them. The only other
I say
factor I could.
my office authorized retaining them because we need to
Yeah.
know how much.
So it wasn't the partnership?
No,
that
it wasn't
hired
partnership.
No,
I thought that'd be a bad idea if you recall.
That's correct.
But that we should contract with them. But yeah, that's the circumstance we're surrounding.
And of
that.
course, the
I'm glad
property
you
cannot
brought
be
it up.
sold because without the low-income housing restrictions being placed on it too. And it's my understanding that that also affects value, is that those low-income housing restrictions are in place for a double period for 30 years. So,
Thank you. Are we ready to vote then?
No, I have my comment. Don't hiss
Oh.
like that, that's not.
I didn't hiss. No, I,
Commissioner Thornton, did you have another, did you,
it was Jesse's mouse.
okay.
I wanted to say, and Commissioner Hall has some good questions because there are people who all of this is in our package, everybody, okay? But I guess getting it out so people can hear why and how is important. But one thing I do want to say, and it's related, but it's indirectly related. We're going to have to start building better relationships with DCA, period, across the board. I was at a board meeting on Friday, and there was a split with this institutional governmental agency in DCA. So they're wondering what is happening at DCA. So as we move forward, it's about relationships and figuring out who we're working with and why. It's not, I'm not going to say it's the same case, but there is something going on. And DCA handles the bulk of everything in communities. And if we are not having a good understanding and a good relationship on the front end, we're always going to be stagnant in what we're doing. But if I was not on that call on Friday and it came up about DCA, this probably would not have made a connection to me whatsoever. So I'm just putting it out as we move forward on any of our projects, any relationships with DCA. We probably need to extend the olive branch and build some relationships. Some things are never written, but it happens. So that was my only point.
Thank you, Commissioner Thornton, for those comments. I think we are ready to vote here. I will ask Manager Williams, though, in the new year, I think there's been a lot of important points brought up concerning this. When we have the new commissioners in place, perhaps we can have an overview of this project as it's moving forward there. So just as a reminder, we are voting right now on item 3, which is to approve an intergovernmental agreement awarding the Athens Housing Authority in partnership $4 million in ARPA funding for North Athens downtown redevelopment, as well as addressing the previous June and September awards, which included both ARPA and SPLOST 2020 funds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it, and the motion passed. That's the end of our special call session. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
And if you have any questions, you can always call
Okay.
our office. We'll be happy to
Okay.
answer.
All in favor of adjourning this special?
I have before.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, special call session is adjourned, and we'll take 3 minutes. Are we have people getting up? We ready to start? Okay, let's just then go right into our agenda-setting meeting. I thought there might be some movement here. Okay.
Public comment on 1:10 first.
Okay. Take care. Okay, we're going to get started now on our agenda setting session, where we'll be reviewing the items that are on the agenda for our December 6th meeting. If the business isn't concluded by 8:15, we'll take a 15-minute break. I do want to announce to anyone in the chamber that item 33, the Jefferson Lavender Road planning item, has been withdrawn. The item 22 title has been corrected, and there has been an update to item 28 on the elections resolution. And we will be taking these, right now we'll start with the citizen in public input on the consent agenda. But before we do that, are there any of my commissioners here who would like to withdraw anything from the consent agenda?
Yes, I would like to withdraw item number 10, agenda item number 10.
10. Anyone else?
I have 8 just for a quick question.
Okay. Got it. All right. Then if there's anyone out in the public who wants to speak to the consent agenda items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, and 11, please come forward to the podium. There are cards up there. Do we have anyone here? I think we are good. Okay. Let's then move on to the rest of the agenda, and if there's any public comment on the items 8, 10, and the rest of the agenda from, what do we got?
15.
15 through 30, right? Please come forward at this point. We don't have any public comment. And again, as we did earlier, we have 3 minutes. Please announce your name, fill in the card at the top before you leave, or get it to our attorney, and you'll have 3 minutes, and the orange light will go on. Please announce your name first. Our orange light comes on when you got 30 seconds.
Okay.
So go for it.
Thanks. I'm Heather Benham, Executive Director of the Athens Land Trust, and I'm here to talk about the Youth and Community Enrichment Campus. First, I would like to personally thank the Athens-Clarke County Commission for its work last Thursday in advancing the youth and community enrichment facility that has been in the works since 2018. While we all work together to identify the most practical and feasible path forward, we must remain intentional about the spirit of this project and the young lives that this effort will impact for years to come. We all know and have experienced the challenges that often come when transformative efforts, like the previous project, and major investments are underway. But I look at these challenges as the opportunities that will define and refine this project for the better moving forward. Collectively, we all want this project to succeed, and a major aspect of its success is driven by our mayor, Athens-Clarke County Commission, our newly selected superintendent, our school board members, and other community and area stakeholders working hand in hand. This takes our larger community, all of us coming together to impact the change needed in this process. And without any doubt, I know we can get there. As many of you know, Athens Land Trust has a 28-year history of improving the quality of life for all by preserving, protecting, and strengthening the fabric of the community through education and the stewardship of land for purposes of affordable housing, conservation, agriculture, and economic development. During my tenure leading this organization, I can assure you that all of our efforts have been benefiting neighborhoods across the Athens area. And at our core, we are focused on empowering and enhancing the communities we proudly get to call home. We look forward to supporting the effort by the Athens-Clarke County Commission to identify a path forward for the Youth and Community Enrichment Facility that works jointly with our partners at the school district and others to guide our energy and harness our combined synergy in the most productive and collaborative way possible. I truly believe there's a common denominator that we can all agree is our top priority: the youth of Athens-Clarke County. So at the heart of this process, I ask each of you to consider the ways you can bridge the gaps by working with our partners to ensure the community receives this highly anticipated investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Benham. Do we have any other public comment? Okay, then let's move behind the rail, and we'll start with number 8 on the, that we've removed from the consent agenda. And Commissioner Hool, you requested that?
Yeah, my understanding is that we update this just every year, kind of a matter of procedure, but last year this was updated while we were still under a local emergency order under COVID. So I was just curious if there's a version of this that kind of highlights any changes that were made from the previous version to this one, or if y'all could just speak in summary very briefly to what was altered, if anything.
Yeah, potentially we could share a draft that shows the key changes, but we summarized those changes in Facts and Issues 6. And so there's been an update related to the annual crisis prevention training. There's been key performance indicators added. We're tracking safety-related incidents and addressing lighting, increased cameras, and emergency telephone lines. So those are things that have been added, but we can go back if you want to see a copy of changes and potentially highlight some of those in the update. This is an annual FTA required safety plan that was first done in 2020, then 2021, and then this year this will be the third rendition.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Got your answer question? Question answered? Do you want to put this back on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
If it's easy enough to get that version,
Sure.
if there's a track changes, it'd be
Okay.
great to see it, but happy with it on consent.
Okay, and then we're going to move on to number 10.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to leave this off consent. Leave this off the consent agenda, and I'll be asking for us to put a 30-day hold in December. So leave off consent.
Thank you.
And I also learned today that this is informally, without any written request, that the developer, through their engineering representative, may also be desiring to hold it. And so there's no objections that we know of at this point, but we'll let you know if anything else surfaces.
Did we vote on the consent agenda?
We're not voting tonight, it's agenda setting. Okay,
I don't even know what day it is.
okay, it's okay.
It's cold.
It's very cold in here, and apologies for all of you out there. Our boiler is down. Hopefully it'll get fixed tomorrow. Okay, so we are back to our discussion here, and I think then we are moving on to item number 15, the T-Splost 2018 Project 15 Atlanta Highway Corridor Improvements Project. Commissioner Hamby?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thanks. I'm glad this is on the agenda, and Commissioner Hool and I've been working with this project for quite some time now, and I think it's moving forward. And I know the user group is meeting tomorrow to discuss some potential changes to the project that I think will satisfy and be good for both Timothy and Mitchell Bridge Road. Maintaining the multi-use path, but just clearing, identifying some Tier 1 projects to move forward with.
Great.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Hool, this is in your district as well. Do you have any?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Hamby covered it. We'll have a CDO that I'm looking forward to sharing with y'all. And I really appreciate the time staff has put in to help us get there, and the time the user group has put in to help us get here as well.
Okay, and the next item is the recommendations from the Athens Justice and Memory Project.
I can speak to this. I'm actually
That would be
on
wonderful.
the
Thank you, Commissioner
I'm actually
Hamby.
on the committee in the Athens Justice Memory Project, as you can see in the agenda item report. They're asking for one thing that is to be approved upon, and they're asking for another thing that will come at a future date. But the one thing that they're asking for is the approximately $1.25 million in contingency funding from ARPA that goes towards one of our goals in ARPA, and that's fixing up some affordable housing and offering some down payment assistance for people wishing to purchase some homes. So a lot of the information from the history and facts and issues in the agenda report, but look forward to the support on this, which I think you guys will appreciate.
Appreciate that update. Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, point of order.
Yes.
Sir, did we miss 16? Or did I miss it because I was out getting water?
No, we missed 16, so we will return to 16.
As soon as, we're
As
done
we
with
finish this,
17.
That's right.
Maybe go back.
So I'm switching back and forth between these two pairs of glasses, so thank you so much for being on top of that.
I was going to comment on 16 as well, if I could.
Well, let's finish the discussion of
All right.
17. Do we have anyone else who wants to speak on 17? Commissioner Hool?
Yeah, do we have clarity on whether, and if so, how much of that 1.25 million would go to administrative overhead? I heard that kind of mentioned in the work session, and my hope, I'm excited to support this. My hope is that we would move forward with this 1.25 million. The idea is that this is sort of repairing a harm done that we've calculated a cost for, and I would hope that the fullness of that amount would go towards that cause, and whatever administrative overhead we incur in seeing that through, we would find another way to pay for. That goes beyond that number is my personal feeling. I'm just curious how it's currently contemplated.
So just to clarify, Commissioner, are you asking about how much administrative overhead be required by the unified government or the ultimate third-party entities that would be receiving the grants and then distributing them for the purposes of rehab and down payment assistance?
The unified government.
Okay, I'll get an answer on that. I don't think that we would charge any administrative overhead there, but I would certainly believe that the third-party entities would expect to use that to help pay for their personnel.
Thank you. Are we good? Now we will go backwards to 16, the Athens.
Discussion's fine.
Discussion. Oh, we'll leave it on. Yeah. Okay, we're moving back to 16, the Athens-Clarke County Extension A&R Agent for Community Garden Program. Do we have some discussion of that?
Sure.
Commissioner Hamby?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I do have some discussion. I certainly appreciate the Athens-Clarke County Extension making a proposal to us for using this $150,000 for a community garden program. I would like to, however, put out there that, some other organizations have also been doing the community gardening program for a long time now. Athens Land Trust helped us start the community garden land program, and I'm just kind of wondering why we haven't engaged other folks in the process as well, and why we're just why we're automatically just defaulting to the extension office, who certainly part of their program, of the natural program for extension offices, to do education and such as that. So they're not really in some ways doing anything new here, but just Athens Land Trust, for an example, they do actually go out and do the gardens and help people set up the gardens, and I'm just wondering why we haven't put this out there for others to also make a proposal to us on.
Manager Williams, do you want to address that?
Well, just the last several years, and at least leading up to the pandemic, the Cooperative Extension had suggested that they would play a role in helping with, through the schools, community gardens. So when we looked at that allocation of funds, we considered, who in the local government would be best suited for that type of thing, and they had asked before, so we asked them to develop a proposal. Certainly, if the commission wants to put this out, for RFP, then that's possible as well.
Well, and just to follow up real
Yeah.
quick, I guess my concern with this one is just some of the similar concerns that Commissioner Wool had with the dollars that we're trying to use to get into the community, go into overhead. And within this one, I know the university would help with some of the salaries, but, and part of these dollars are going for $42,000, out of the $150, $42,000 is for a annual salary for a new agent for the county extension, $4,800 for travel allowance, and $33,000 for equipment and supplies. I'm just wondering what's left for the gardens. So, and whether or not some other organization could provide a service that helps us reach more people and provide more garden assistance.
Thank you. Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, when we had talked about this at our recent retreat, it was also tied in, I think, to a commission-defined option for youth development. The ARPA money for this, 150,
This is a budget line item.
am I remembering that right, Commissioner Hill?
It was a budget line item.
Yeah,
It was
and so, and for me, I think the youth development and the gang situation that's in, I don't know, I think we need to be allocating our funding to something a little more intervention versus time. Instead of planting a seed, I think that the money could be better spent in youth development with something a little bit more impactful as far as that. I do agree that if we were to do an RFP that was saying what options could come forward for youth development in community garden, that there could be something more focused on youth. And I'm not sure that the way this was presented at the retreat and the details I heard were going to be youthfully impactful in the immediate future, which is, I think, the way I would want the money to go. It even came up to look into see if that funding could be done with gun buyback, I think, was kind of the way we were brainstorming at that point. So it might be that we want to put this on hold and come up with a different.
Well, to that point, if you don't mind, Mayor Pro Tem, and I'll hush, but to that point, in looking at other, I've mentioned the land trust, they do specify young urban farmers, so it is a youth development group that does that. And I'm hard pressed to see and I agree with you, because I'm hard pressed to see in the county extension proposal that I'm looking here, it's just, I don't see much of the word youth being mentioned, but just an observation.
Thank you. Manager Williams, could you address the funding source for this item? Because I think this was a budget item, not the.
It was 2 budgets ago.
It was an FY22 budget item, but ARPA funds were designated for it
Okay.
in FY22.
But not part of the youth development bucket. That was a line item.
Mayor Commission voted on this for the FY22 budget.
Yeah, just to clarify, when we first got ARPA, $2 million was used to balance the budget, and so that dependence was projected to wean off over several years, and so from that revenue replacement category, the $150,000 y'all allocated for gardens.
Thank you. Commissioner Hool?
Yeah, I guess I still feel positively about this. I got a different impression from that presentation in our retreat. I thought that, obviously we've sat on this for a year and a half. It was approved 2 budgets ago. And Commissioner Parker, who's not here to argue for it, I think was the one really championing it at that time, as I recall. I can't speak to exactly what's going to come of this, except that this is a plan for something to come of it instead of it sitting somewhere for a year and a half, and I'm hesitant to punt even further into what feels kind of like the ether, and I'm hesitant to think of this money as going further if we send it through an RFP process, just because then there's administrative overhead on our end of making sure that there's somehow, we end up spending money just to spend money if we're, putting it out to bid or anything. Whereas in this case, I think we spend less than we otherwise would for a staff member, because we get this partnership with the university to help cover some of those costs, to pay someone well and give them benefits to do the work. And ultimately, what makes a community garden work is that you're paying someone to do the work of facilitating it being a community garden. And they mapped out which gardens they'd start with, these fallow gardens that are properties the county already owns that haven't been in operation for years, and then from there to build toward assembling a database that actually had some criteria for identifying what gardens are community gardens. So, is it publicly accessible? Who gets to use the food? Who's working on it? Is it active or is it fallow? Things like that. We don't have that kind of database. That to me seemed like a good place to start, and then maybe from there, this is a temporary kind of contract program. Maybe from there we look at creating a staff position, or maybe from there we look at converting it into something that we would put out for bid and fund some other way, or that someone like the land trust or any other other entity could take over. But just to get something going, this seemed like a good place to start, especially with us swirling around on it for 18 months.
I'm going to let Commissioner Link hasn't spoken on this, and then get back to Commissioner
That's fine,
Hamby.
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to chime in with my personal support for this project and for the concept of community gardens as a youth development program. I can see great mental health benefits to getting kids involved in this kind of program. It's not just about, doing some work and growing some food, but there's a lot of lessons to be learned in the cycles of nature and, wildlife and, native pollinators. And there's a whole lot of really intricate and important lessons that can be learned and really beneficial, mentally healthy and physically healthy activities associated with gardening. And the more we can get some of these kids outside in the fresh air, away from whatever's on TV and whatever kind of video games they're playing and, whatever kind of illicit activities might be going on in their neighborhoods, because we know that's happening. But if we can get them in these gardens, getting their hands dirty and observing nature and wildlife, only positive outcomes can come from that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, but my point here is that, and really what we're doing, we have an organization already doing this, so this is the duplication of services. So we have to ask ourselves the question, do we want to nurture and grow what's already being done, or do we want to start something new and use dollars that are not necessarily going to serving more people? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, clearly leaving this on new business, and we'll move to item 18, the amendment to the recycled water rate.
Consent.
Consent. Good with that? Okay. Clerk Spratlin will move that to consent. We'll move on to number 19, the 2023 Georgia Department of Transportation Local Maintenance Improvement Grant Application Submittal.
Sure, I have a question for this, and this is something that always comes before us every year, and it looks like some additional dollars are coming to this year, not too much more, but my question is this: I see the list that's down here, and the list has several of them are below the PCI payment, whatever the PCI score that are between 25 and 40, which are poor. But is there a way where I'd like to see the whole list that are below 40, so that we can see, there may be some streets in some of our districts that we've been getting some phone calls on that are below 40 as well, that this money could help go towards from that standpoint. Not saying that any of the streets on here aren't deserving, but I'd certainly like to see a list of the total county streets below 40.
And thank you, Commissioner.
Or within the range here we're looking for, not necessarily below 40. There's one on here that's at 52.
So the complete list typically is developed by staff and brought to you, in February, March of the new year.
Right.
By utilizing those recent automated scores. And you're right, this is only a partial list. The complete list would include street segments both shown in attachment 2, plus more that had been recently identified with staff report of very poor rating. So that will come to you, and you will, Mayor and Commission will approve the ultimate list. We're required by GDOT to give them some sense of what's going to get paved with the application, but you have the final say.
Yeah, I get that, and I guess in order to have the final say, we need to see some sort of, because issue number 12, it reads as though there's more, of course, there's more on some sort of list that's been developed. So I guess in order for us to make a good decision about the roadways, we need to see a total list.
And the decision on all the roadways is made in the spring. This is just, the real thing you're being asked to do is approve the application. We'll submit these streets to them, but you'll get the full list in the spring when you approve the final list for the calendar year 23.
So even though we're submitting this list, doesn't tie us down to just this list for the LMIG?
Let me ask about that, and I'll
Okay,
confirm
that's-
that for you.
Okay, that's good, thank you.
Good question, Commissioner Hamby. Any other questions on this item? Okay. So we leave that off consent. On consent? Off consent, okay. Okay, we're moving on to item 20, which is the SPLOST 2011 Project 22, Youth and Community Enrichment Facility, the candidate site selection.
Consent?
No.
I think it needs community discussion, but I'm looking forward to seeing this project move forward and finally getting something on the ground in the community. This is a 2011 SPLOST project, and if only we'd been able to move forward quickly on it, several years ago, this facility could have been on the ground during the pandemic and really benefited the community.
Any other comments? Manager Williams, did you have anything you wanted to add to this? You're good? Okay. Let's continue on then to item.
I'd like to say
Yes,
something to
yes.
this though, because
Please
we've got a list here, and I appreciate the user group and that put this together and the pros and cons of each of them, but perhaps when we go to vote on this, I'm assuming that staff will go back and talk to the property owners that are on this list. I was kind of hoping that a process would have already been done in doing that, because if I'm a property owner and I see my property on a list, not only for this, but for any other thing, I'd be going, what's going on here? So I think in order to be mindful of others, that we need to make sure to do that.
Yeah, and I will address that. I did have a similar discussion with Manager Williams today, and so we were talking about a way to be a little bit more communicative with about the selection process, what it is, what it isn't.
That's right, you're chair of it, because I just think we need to communicate beforehand, before it gets out there, like it does to us, with potential sites, not only for this project, but for others. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 21, that's the Oconee Rivers Greenway Network Connectors Project, the public art. And there was some really nice public art in the agenda item, if anyone looks in there.
Looks really nice.
Yeah.
Consent. Yeah.
Consent? Well, good with moving to consent? Yeah,
I
wonderful.
just got a question though.
Yes,
No, it's
Mr.
beautiful.
Dale.
I can't wait till this is done. And maybe somebody in the arts community, but paint and, so you look at the diagram, or the picture description, the budget for paint and materials is only $3,500. It seems a little low, but I'm not an artist, so, but if staff can explain that. Or,
I sat in on the picking and the selection of this stuff, and they made it very clear to the type of paint that had to be used.
Okay.
And the applicants said they could do it within that. And it is just the surface area of, as that diagram shows.
We're good? Certain.
Well, to that point, and I do appreciate the question, one thing to consider, we talked about life cycle of infrastructure at our recent retreat. And there's really not a funding source for life cycle replacement or maintenance of numerous art structures, the numerous art installations that we have. And, this item, as well as the painting of the retaining wall along the Greenway at the Loop and the Waffle House on Lexington Road, those are painted projects, and, paint has a finite life. So as we think about next year's budget and life cycle and our art installations, if we want to keep them up, or we're going to need to put funds aside for that.
Thank you. Commissioner Hool, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that up, Manager Williams, and, I'm happy with this staying on consent. And I don't feel like we need to alter this particular agenda item in order to see it through, but I would ask that in the future, as staff is devising these, it would be helpful to have that estimated cost of maintenance built into these agenda reports so we can see that. We get kind of a report usually, I see the report the artist gives and what they think that will entail, but that doesn't break down in a nice summary fashion the estimated cost year over year. I think those would be helpful.
That's certainly something we could advise the Cultural Affairs Commission on, that perhaps in the RFPs, when they solicit designs, to talk about what the expected life is and what the maintenance cost might be, to convey that, not unlike our SPLOST projects.
Because it seems to me like some of the things that are lower cost on the front end end up being higher cost year to year because they don't last. So, if you're replacing paint every couple of years, it seems cheap up front, but if you really want that to stick around, or have the expectation that it just only lasts a couple of years.
Well, this one's under a bridge, so it's going to last a long time.
Probably except for the paint that's like on the trail.
Okay.
Consent.
Okay, consent agenda. Moving on to item 22, and off the discussion of paint, to the Oconee Rivers Greenway project construction service award for the carriage lane Cars Creek Greenway. Commissioner Wright, this is in your district. Do you have any comments?
Consent?
Consent? We
Be
good with
great.
that? I'm good with that.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
this is great. More segments.
Yes.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Okay, moving on to 23. This is Project 20, the Parks and Facilities Improvement. Do we have any discussion of this?
Consent. We had a good work session on
Yeah.
some of this.
Is everyone good with this going on to consent? Yes, I'm taking that as a yes. We have a lot on this agenda. Okay.
Totally happy with that. Just reiterating the request from the work session to get information on if and how a mural can be incorporated into that exterior painting.
Oh, that's right.
That's something we discussed in the work session.
More maintenance.
More memory. Moving on to item 24, another topic we had a great work session on, the broadband connectivity enhancement, the project concept.
Consent.
Consent.
All right. Now make sure public goes back, if you're interested, to last week's work session. Moving on to 25, this is SPLOST 2020 Project 34, Water Trails Project, Macon Highway Launch Proposed Schematic Design.
Consent.
Consent. We all good with that?
Mhm.
Okay. On to 26, this is, we had a good discussion of this last week, the Memorial Park Improvement, Project 16.
Can we leave that off to consent until we get updates on parking and?
Yes, I think we need to leave that off consent. Is there anything else?
Well, I'm just, this is not part of the park, but certainly Commissioner Wright has worked on this, and the request from the folks along Grand Island there to have a sidewalk that leads to the park. And, this is one of the most heavily used parks, probably behind Bishop Park and Southeast Clerk Park. All of our other parks, with the exception of Ben Burton, have a sidewalk that go to them that help folks get to the park. And I'm not sure, perhaps we can find a way to make it happen. I don't know if it's necessarily within the budget. It doesn't look like it is within this park improvement, but I know we also have the Bear Hollow improvements that are part of SPLOST. So I think the latest estimate I saw for a sidewalk along Grand Island was about $600,000. Seems like a small amount for a large park that gets a lot of usage.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, we had a really good, productive work session on this, and speaking to the idea of sidewalks and walkability, it was brought up that even if you get to Memorial Park, it's not necessarily a very walkable park because it has the circular drive going through it. And what did come up in that discussion was the suggestion that one leg of that circular drive become purely a pedestrian and bike path, which might encourage more people to actually walk and bike to the park and use it as a facility where you can do that. So I assume we'll be hearing more from staff about that concept that we presented, because it kind of changes the master plan. So I presume we'll have more discussion of this.
So in the short term, staff is preparing a memo that tries to parse through some of the comments and what some of the potential consequences could be. And it could be that after we get you that and we hear some of your discussions, that we might hold that until we can get through more of a discussion. But we'll be getting some to you hopefully this week.
Yeah, this has had some extensive work done with the user group and in the overloved patrons and neighbors in that area. And if there's going to be some ideas for some substantial changes, we're going to have to kick that back out to get that feedback from those who have been working on it. And some of the gully repairs from the water, the terrain over there, as well as on Grand Island, maybe we can get some of those boulders on that road to work on that runoff. It's very hilly there. There are going to be some speed humps coming in to Grand Island to help slow down while everybody's walking in the road. But I like that idea, and this will be in your district in January, Commissioner Hamby, so maybe we can team up and find some of that funds for that, or other funds.
I would support holding this and really thinking a little bit more deliberately about that loop road that we talked about in the work session, you know, exploring pedestrianizing a path to get down from the zoo to the pond. You know, there's really no way to get down there so far. You got people competing with motorists to get down to the pond. I don't see why we need a loop road there. So I'm really happy to hear about speed bumps on Grand Island, though. That's great.
Yeah.
People drive just stupid all through there. It's ridiculous. I hate it.
Right. Well, and just to add to the terrain at that park is challenging for those that aren't in somewhat nearly peak health. And so if we're going to make sure our parks and recreation and outdoor space is available for people with limited mobility and disabilities, we do need to keep all that in mind, that not everybody can hike up and down that hill, or push strollers up and down that hill, or wheeled apparatuses that they sit in. So we do need to be real mindful of that.
Thank you. We look forward to more information from staff on that. Obviously, leaving that off consent. Moving to 27, the SPLOST 2020 Project 3, the Classic Center Arena, the proposed schematic design for the Hickory Street parking deck and proposed contract changes. Any discussion? We've had a lot of discussion in work sessions on this.
Leave off consent.
Yeah, we'll leave off consent. Yes, I agree. All right.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I could, I just wanted to point out that one of the admonitions by the Mayor and Commission of Staff was to try and accelerate the deployment of the SPLOST funds, T-SPLOST funds, and, you know, of the items that are not planning related, fully a third of those are SPLOST items tonight. I just want to recognize the work of staff on that.
Much appreciated.
Well done.
And our user groups, for that matter, because folks are giving us a lot of time.
Do. Yes, yeah. Number 29, strengthening mobility and revolutionizing transportation, SMART grant application. There's only a title only, so we're going to leave that where it is. Moving on, the Office of, yes, question.
I'd just
Number
like to
29.
request that the clerk, when able, update the elections resolution with the new version on the online posting, just if we're moving it to consent, so people have that to reference, because we're not going to be discussing it. Yeah.
Okay. Number 29, we're good on that. We're moving on to the Office of Operation Analysis, and there'll be more coming on that. There's been a committee working with the mayor in terms of rebooting that. Does anyone on the committee need to or want to bring up anything? Okay. That gets us through 30. Hey, man, we are good, moving along here. We're now at the part of our meeting, we're going to receive staff reports and public input on recommendations from the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission. And we'll start with a staff report, and then we will take public input after each of those. However, this is not the required public hearing, which is tentatively scheduled for these items for Tuesday, December 6th. So I'm assuming you need me to get out of the way. Chair, yes.
Chair Myers, did we do consent for 1 through 14 minus consent item 10? Did we approve that? Do we have to approve that? No. It just seemed like we just jumped into 15. We didn't do consent. You know how like Gertrude do for the consent agenda items? As we remove, do y'all approve for 1 through?
We're not voting tonight, though.
Yeah, we're not voting for it. But to move it to consent, I thought we had to
Well, yeah, so the item you pulled off, did you say leave it off? You said leave it off.
leave it off.
Yeah, but I think Jesse's, you said put it back on.
Okay.
His thing went
I think that's where that, but you know, when we come to vote for it, we can also say,
Move it off.
Yeah, we can move it up.
but you can't put it on until now.
Okay, I've been directed by the mayor to go ahead and get started.
Great.
To move it along, so let's go. We've got 2 zoning items tonight, 2 text amendments.
Oh, okay, I see what's happening. Okay, go.
It's good.
Yeah.
First item is 1165 Oglethorpe Avenue. This is a request to amend about a 10-year-old plan development at that location. It's a very significant amendment in that the 2013 PD that was originally approved and is still on record was for a medical complex. The grading was done on it, and nothing was ever built.
That little
forest
girl
was
spoke to us
devastated.
about her fort in the backyard.
In the birds, 10 years ago. I know it doesn't seem like it, but it was.
Okay.
Site has kind of reclaimed itself again through the years after the original grading, but this request is for a residential and commercial mixed-use project, implements a lot of components of alternative housing, missing middle type of approach. 38 total residential units, and you see the breakdown there of a variety of housing types. 10 units per acre at about 23 bedrooms per acre. There is commercial in the front, fronting Oglethorpe, a little over 7,000 square feet with plaza, courtyards, an area that is designed initially and intentionally to potentially provide for food trucks as an option in one of the plaza spaces. There are 84 parking spaces, some age-restricted units, and 5 that are identified in the report as income restricted, although those are not specifically identified on the plan as to where those will be. But the applicant, who is the same applicant as you saw across the road at 1010 Oglethorpe, has indicated they're currently in discussions with some of our local providers to provide some affordable housing. As with these types of missing middle projects, a lot of waivers are required, and that's part of this plan development process. But there are a couple at the end that I do want to point out specifically. So you see the site here, it's directly across from the elementary school. It backs up and touches, that's Landor, that is part of Forest Heights, that the property touches in the curve. You see the proposal here, the 2 buildings, 1 and 6 that you see in the front are the 2 commercial buildings. One is a daycare facility, is originally proposed, and the second is a mixed-use building that would have coffee shop / retail restaurant potential in the bottom with residential over the top. And as you move through to the back, you see a mix of housing types, attached townhouses, some single-family detached homes that are facing the green, 3 of those having detached garages with possibility of units over the top. And then I think 15 and 16 appear to be the age-restricted units. There's a triplex and a quad that you see there on the north and south sides of the green in the rear. So you see there's a variety. To get to the residential in the back where you see, I'll try to do this, Commissioner Davenport, without jumping us around. This is a gated access point from the commercial back into the residential area. There is no vehicular access to Landor, but there is a pedestrian access that would allow the pedestrian interface from Landor into the project to be able to access through potentially to the coffee shop and or the daycare, or ultimately across the street to the school as a potential. So just some example architecture here. Those are the 2 buildings in the front. And then just some typicals of townhouse, single-family attached. I think these are the senior facilities, the triplex, and then there would be a quad on the other side of the green as well. Planning Commission recommendation is to approve with, there were 2 conditions that came out. One of those have been addressed in terms of a porch and that porch, let me show you real quick, was on the building at the very top right corner here. Just because of its proximity, it's almost backing into Landor, so the Planning Commission wanted a porch to wrap at least and have some presence towards Landor. And then the second condition, and I will leave it here, is a buffer. And there was a lot of discussion on this as it moved through to the point I went back and re-listened to that meeting to see where we landed with a recommendation on the buffer. Across what is the bottom of this development as it backs up to the neighborhood towards the bottom of the picture here. And the condition is that it is a 10-foot buffer that can either be planted or a fence. It doesn't have to be both, but the key here in terms of what is coming to you from the Planning Commission is it says 10-foot buffer. So if they do the fence, we've still got an issue in a couple spots, and I've talked to the designer about this a little in terms of some possible, if the condition remains worded as it came out of the Planning Commission, you've got a small area right down in here that we're going to bust, that we're inside that 10 feet, as well as this very back corner of the right-hand unit on building 16 gets into it by 2 or 3 feet. So they're either going to need to modify that building or you're going to need to work with them a little bit on that wording of the condition to allow that to occur. But just to point that out. The one other thing that I do want to point out, this came out of staff with a recommendation not to approve. And it always gets a little bit messy when that happens, because if we then come out of Planning Commission with an approval, oftentimes there are things in the report that were basis as far as staff goes for the denial recommendation that don't get addressed with the approval. And some of those that we cannot address as part of this process. There are 2 of them here. The issue with public utilities and their recommendation about the public water and sewer services needing to front on the lots that are within this development. And if you look at, I think it was section 6 of the staff report, they do a pretty specific job of pointing out why this does not, why they're recommending denial, because it does not follow their policies and procedures for public utilities. We can't do waivers to public utilities procedures as part of a plan development for zoning. We can only do waivers to the zoning requirements that are within our code. So that's still going to need to be addressed when this project, if it is approved, when it goes to construction, they're going to have to work through that issue with the utilities department. The other issue that was in the report that I think will still be a requirement if approved was a left turn lane on Oglethorpe Avenue that was recommended by our traffic engineer to be installed if this project is developed. So just wanted to point those 2 things out, as well as the buffer. The buffer, I think, is something you can assist them with in terms of a motion if you were to approve this project to provide a little relief in those 2 areas. We can't waive utility department standards or traffic engineering requirements as part of the PD. So just information up front. But with that, Planning Commission recommended that this project be approved, and it was a 6-vote affirmative with 1 abstention. And that concludes the staff report.
Do we have any public here who would like to speak to this project?
Brad, where's the section on the public utility waiver?
It is in the staff report, section 6. Let me get your page. I know your pages are going to be different than mine. Mine is page 10 of the staff report, water and sewer availability. And then the first bullet says each lot must have direct access to water, sewer, main for service. One lot removed exception does not apply to newly subdivided lots.
Oh, got it. Okay, cool. Thank you.
I mean, that's something they could work through. It's obviously added costs and design issues potentially, but it's not something that we can waive.
And, please state your name.
So, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Josh Coons. I live at 205 Clover Street, and I'm here representing the owners tonight. I wanted to take this opportunity in advance of the voting meeting just to talk to you a little bit more about this project. Happy to talk about the utilities in detail. We've got that worked out, I think. But just in general, as noted in Brad's report, the development is an alternative to the previously approved medical complex and is intended to be a compact, walkable neighborhood comprised of 3 distinct nodes, the mixed-use commercial node along the street, the townhouse garden court in the middle, and then the cottage square at the end, that all 3 of which are connected by pedestrian pathways from Oglethorpe back to Landor Drive. It's been designed for affordability in the missing middle housing sector by streamlining infrastructure, minimizing car-oriented improvements, and using smaller footprints to increase density. Staff recognized, and we appreciate in their report, that the project works towards many of the policies in the latest comprehensive plan, including a variety of housing at multiple price points, affordable and senior housing, infill development, incorporating green space, and identifying areas for unique developments. We think this area is a unique development. What makes this request unique is that it provides an alternative for infill development that replaces the street as the unifying element of a neighborhood with green space around which these proposed houses are oriented. This arrangement, though, ultimately requires a number of the waivers that we need. And we appreciate, again, staff's support of the majority of these waiver requests as they noted, they're the result of a unique and creative idea. Unfortunately, removing the street resulted in a number of the waivers that they haven't been able to show support for. We understand that, but they ultimately have led to denial of the project. And, they're specifically the result of removing the typical street that we've been working on for the last 20 years in the code. Staff's recommendation ultimately is to connect a street to Landor Drive in Forest Heights, and the Forest Heights neighborhood has been pretty clear that while they've embraced the idea of the project and really are looking forward to the mixed-use portion, they don't want any additional traffic on Landor Drive specifically and in their neighborhood, not even a driveway, which is one of the elements we showed early on. So ultimately, working with their concerns, what this project is asking you to consider is, why is the car, a requirement for that connectivity? Why can't we keep the sidewalks and replace the street with common green space? Removing the street allows us to create the unique green spaces that we have, again, all of which are connected by pedestrian greenways. Those spaces offer a lot of variety and interest and differences in scale that we wouldn't have otherwise. So, thank you. I appreciate it, but I just want to let you know we're here for questions, and I'd be happy to talk about anything at length. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other public comment?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Commissioners. Sorry, I'm most up here. I am Dr. Tawana Smith Maddox, representing Destin Incorporated, And we voice our support for Oglethorpe 1165 as partners who will operate a daycare center as part of this development. We do believe this project supports your strategic commitment to build shared prosperity and create a healthy, livable, and sustainable Athens-Clarke County. Many residents are facing skyrocketing rental fees, eviction, and in some cases, homelessness. This project will not be a magic wand to solve all of our affordable housing needs. However, it will be one project that helps to move the needle for providing home ownership to families who need it most. Destin Inc. is a 501c nonprofit committed to bettering the lives of families. We're excited about this mixed development that links current residents and the proposed new residents with the addition of a family business and a daycare to be run by our family, the Smith family, who has spent the last 23 years supporting young people and partnering with our parents. After renting spaces for many years, Destin Inc. is excited for the opportunity to work towards building ownership and to provide a safe and premier educational experience at affordable rates. What we appreciate about this project the most is the intentional effort to be inclusive. Destin Inc. is a woman-owned, family-owned, and Black-owned business. After years of giving, many years of using mostly our own resources and sacrificing a lot to demonstrate our commitment to a better Athens by working with our youth, we always encourage our young people to look beyond their addresses or income status or how they may be treated and stay focused on their defined American dream. A dream that demonstrates how hard work, commitment to service, lifelong learning, weathering storms, and remaining focused can lead to putting each on their path and their defined success. Providing a stable space for our families to learn and grow is part of our success story, and we are grateful. Last, I want to mention we are native Athenians. Currently, most of us live near the area of town for this proposed project, and as neighbors of the project, we welcome the addition of affordable housing and affordable daycare. We hope to have your support for the project. Feel free to reach out to me. We succeed together, and it works.
Thank you, Dr. Maddox. Is there any further public comment?
Hi, I'm Seth Hendershot, and I would be opening the proposed cafe in the 1165 development, and I just wanted to come out and speak in favor of it. I think it's a great idea. I think I'm a former Forest Heights resident myself. I live in Homewood Hills now. Still have many friends in Forest Heights. Both of my children went to Oglethorpe Avenue Elementary. Our vision is to open a cafe, neighborhood cafe, pub kind of establishment, not a music venue, with the other half of the building we would be occupying. We would hope to open a community co-op kitchen to not only provide a space for caterers and influencers and culinary instructors to provide service, but also further the project of Rashi Malcolm and provide 1,000 meals at least, if not more than twice a month. So that's sort of our goal for this development, and yeah, I hope you guys see the value in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hendershot. Any more public comment?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Joe Polonetsky, and I own Nebo Realty here in Athens, and I'm a partner in this proposed project. 1165 is a proposed community of compact, relatively inexpensive owner and non-owner occupied residences, as well as an affordable component for elderly and otherwise. Our proposed walkable amenities will serve the residents of 1165 as well as the extended community. 2 commercial buildings would house a second Hendershots and a local daycare center that has been searching for a permanent location for years. We are offering both businesses the opportunity for property ownership, forever eliminating the well-known risks of leasing for a business. Younger and older Athenians stand to benefit from our proposed project too. Older Athenians have nothing to scale down to. Our proposal will be new, energy-efficient, low-maintenance residences in a diverse, mixed-age community intentionally designed for folks to look out for each other. Younger in-town residents have all but lost hope of owning a home close in where they currently reside in rentals with no rent controls, and they can't build wealth through home ownership. Home prices have just gotten too high. We intend for our residences to be in a price range that will be noticeably less than what we typically see in town. We have had numerous people, younger and older, already reach out to us with the hope of purchasing. Our project will enhance this section of the Oglethorpe Avenue corridor, making it more akin to the corridor's eastern end in the Normaltown Health Science Campus area. While we are only talking about approximately a half-mile separation between us and the Health Science Campus, the difference in terms of immediate area walkable lifestyle amenities cannot be greater. But now, with the success of Oglethorpe Garage and Sabor Latino Bar and Grill at the western end of Oglethorpe Avenue, this commercial neighborhood-zoned area is beginning to feel just like that, a neighborhood. Our goal at this point is to build on that momentum and make the area even more of a walkable commercial neighborhood corridor while providing homes and community to a diverse group of Athenians, resulting in what we believe will be a highly functional and fulfilling in-town living experience. We love this project, and we think it's innovative and one of the more inclusive new developments to be proposed in Athens, and we hope that you will agree in December. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Poloneski. Any more public comment? Okay, let's take the discussion back on this side of the rail. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, this, I believe, is in Commissioner Denson's district. Oh, it's in Jesse's. I'll let you speak first, though. Go ahead.
All right. Better be good. No pressure. Yeah. Yeah, I have a handful of questions. I'll probably just fire off a list to both the applicant and staff after, but a couple things I was hoping to address that are larger scale in the meeting, and then hoping to also address. I'll start by saying I'm looking forward to supporting this project. I think this is the exact kind of development we need in this community. We need more things like this. I'm thrilled, honestly, that there are two businesses that have been brought into this that are local businesses, one of which a childcare business. I mean, since before I came on this commission and the entire time I've been on it, we've talked about how do we get more childcare in this community, and to see a proposal come forward where a private developer has figured out a way to bring us a childcare facility, and especially a childcare facility that's run by an organization focused on providing that affordably, I think is really not to be downplayed. But I also just think it's a thoughtfully designed project. So with that in mind, I think we need to, adequately address as possible some of the issues that staff raised up, so I look forward to maybe getting some guidance on that, like how to address the public utilities concerns and things in a CDO if you see necessary. I did want to ask, I'm not sure which of these would go to staff versus the applicant. I think it kind of depends on how much conversation has happened between y'all before today. The first question is the multi-use path and/or sidewalk along Oglethorpe. So my understanding is that, obviously a sidewalk is required. There's already a sidewalk there, kind of oddly, but very much noted by many residents in the area. The sidewalk along Oglethorpe has this little grass median between the sidewalk and the road, except in front of this property. And so I'm curious if the existing sidewalk is going to be somehow modified, and if so, how? Would it be widened to be a multi-use path, thinking ahead to the Greenway project that's envisioned for however many years or decades from now to be realized? And then also, would that buffer be applied? Maybe I'll just rattle off the three questions and y'all can speak to any that you're able to. The other is if there's been any discussion of if and where to move the crosswalk on Oglethorpe. Right now, that crosswalk is off. You can kind of just see it in the top left of the screen there. So it just kind of goes to what's the church property from adjacent to a bus stop on the school side. But part of the idea, I think, is that the school is going to be potentially overflow parking for evening events and things. And so if we're expecting people to potentially park over there, then we would expect them to walk across the street. And I would guess that they'd be likely to walk across the street more directly at the place they're going. So I'm wondering if that's something that staff has already considered and or the applicant has already considered. And then the third thing, and this is something I know is very important to the residents of Landor, that street is currently quite low traffic, almost entirely just people who live on it. and there's a steep hill that kind of comes down off the right side there into a fairly sharp and blind curve with issues of visibility that are kind of exacerbated by some plantings that exist on private property. And I'm just curious if there's been any discussion around what kind of traffic calming measures could be explored or would be explored. I don't think the current conditions would warrant, the neighborhood traffic management plan, but expecting that potential increase of use might change those conditions, at what stage would we potentially add some kind of traffic calming or other safety measures to that road? So those are my big three. With a lot of other little details that residents ask me about to ask you about by email.
And I'll probably be the shortest, so I'll jump in first and then turn it over to Mr. Coons, because he may have had those conversations with our Public Works Department, traffic engineering. I mean, we're dealing with sidewalks in a public right-of-way, crosswalks, traffic calming. I don't have any information on any of that in terms of whether or not there have been conversations between the applicant and that department. But right now, those would not be part of the proposal. Doesn't mean, it's all work being done in a public right-of-way, so it doesn't mean that a binding plan is going to prohibit that from occurring. That's as much as I have right now.
Okay.
I don't know if Mr. Coons has more or not.
I can address a number of those things. I'll start with traffic control and the crosswalk, because we did talk to traffic engineering about a number of those. And I can say that we'd be more than happy to bring the crosswalk down and relocate it if we're able to sort of use the same equipment. That's the biggest cost, to be honest with you. But if traffic engineering agreed, and they've already said they thought it was a good idea, we'd be happy to bring that down. We have to incorporate the left turn lane so we can make all of that happen in one swift move. With respect to Landor Drive, we have talked about that extensively, not only with the neighborhood, but with Tim Griffith. What Tim and I discussed was the neighborhood reaching out to him and that department and starting that conversation. We've relayed that process to the neighborhood and specifically the Landor Drive residents. We're happy to help, and I think at one point in time we were even happy to pay for a couple of speed bumps, knowing that even though we don't have that direct connection, there is potential for change that we might be bringing, just even with people wanting to walk or bike and slowing folks down in general. It's a good idea. So all of those we're totally open to at this point in time, and happy to talk to you more about it relative to a CDO. The multi-purpose pathway, I think there is actually like a small 1-foot grass strip there. In other areas, it bumps out a little bit more. And we would be all in favor of trying to get the extra width. Just need to understand what that width is and making sure we can accommodate that within the right-of-way that we have. But that's exactly the sort of thing that we want to embrace with this and along this corridor in general. So no problem there.
Okay. I'll probably follow up with email them, but my understanding is 10 foot is the standard width we look for multi-use, right? So if we're looking to go
We
all
had
the way
5
with that.
already.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be hard to find 5 more.
Okay, so there is enough room in the front there to do that
for
with
5
what
feet,
y'all are
for
dealing
sure.
with. Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Commissioner
Thank you.
Edwards?
Y'all aren't putting a driveway on Landor though, right? Just a sidewalk?
Just a sidewalk.
No cars, right?
No cars. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, sidewalk makes sense to me. I mean, you're gonna get there from Forest Heights, you're gonna walk through these parks, and then you're gonna be directly across the street from the school.
Mhm.
So, when I hear from my traffic engineers, I mean, I'm looking at this plan, children might live here, right? Children might be here. There's gonna be a daycare center.
Correct.
So children will be there probably, right? Yeah, so this is right across from a school. And so, I'm much more interested in what we're going to do with the crosswalk here. I don't think we need another vehicle travel lane. We're talking about not building auto-centric developments. Why are we putting more car lanes here, So I'd much rather see a really beefed up, maybe even a raised crosswalk that's going to be allowing all of these children from Forest Heights to cross the street safely.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a traffic engineer more aligned with children's safety getting to school. You know, people are driving around a ton of steel down Oglethorpe. They're going to get where they need to go, you know.
Yeah.
But we're going to have a lot of kids in this area, so I'm very much more interested in what our traffic engineers are going to say about that crosswalk.
Right.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. Commissioner Link.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this project, and I have friends in Forest Heights who have seemed to be excited about it as well, especially the idea of being able to walk through their neighborhood to a commercial destination without having to cross Oglethorpe Avenue. And I'm excited about the diversity of housing and the design of this housing, this, you know, very simple, modest housing. You know, it's houses that look like houses. I think that some of my concerns about the Oglethorpe sidewalk and crossing, I think, are being addressed. I'm wondering if maybe that that painted median could be a crosswalk median. You know, medians are really essential in slowing traffic, and this is a fast-running stretch of Oglethorpe. I know there's bike lanes there, and I don't know how crazy you have to be to actually use those bike lanes. So, you know, if there is an opportunity for wider sidewalk that could accommodate mixed-use path to get kids on their bikes to that school. But overall, this is an exciting project, and, you know, I think we have to face the reality that these older neighborhoods that were once suburban neighborhoods are urban. Our urban core is expanded, and this is the kind of development that we need to see a little more of in this urban core. This is, you know, a few hundred yards from a main commercial corridor in Hawthorne right there. So this is certainly an ideal location for this kind of development, and across the street from the elementary school.
Commissioner Ray.
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate this project as well, a lot of the different elements. The 20 waivers, I really appreciate how that's mapped out as to how staff supports 12 of them and explains their call, so to speak, of not supporting the other 8. Very detailed presentation. Before anyone moves forward with the crosswalk being moved, I'm on the school district's citizens oversight for East Blost, and that was a pretty complicated situation, getting that crosswalk there for the newly built Oglethorpe Elementary School. So I think that it's a good idea for us to be communicating with our partners, and that happening right there was, anyway, before that's moved, somebody needs to reach out and make some specific discussions with the school district facilities on that, especially for private entity, you know, to make sure there is welcome there and not mess up what was planned on the other side of the street for the bus traffic, the neighborhood traffic, and I believe there was a utility pole that also, anyway, there's some details to be looked into there to make sure we're not conflicting with that.
Thank you, Commissioner Ray. And Commissioner Davenport?
Yes, I like this project. I hope Hendershot can bring back Ike and Jane if they're interested. But so I like the buffers. I like the walkability. It's a great location. I know some of the residents off of Breckenridge who have some concerns, but you know, with the buffer, it's a sensible design. And plus, considering the fact that it could have been a medical facility, when it comes to medical facility, you have constant 9 to 5 in and out. You're adding more traffic to that road. You got a school across the street, which makes it dangerous for the kids. When you have residences, you know, they're not going to be in and out. They're going to go to work, they're going to go home, or they go to work, go out, and come back home and stay put. And just this is much more of a sensible design for that lot that has been sitting there for decades. Yes, the deer are going to be upset. They're going to probably move up north towards the church property, and I'm just addressing some of the concerns I've heard. The Landor Drive, I can't really see people driving back there and parking just to get to the venues up front. It's not, I mean, it's great exercise, and of course their doctors will love it, but it's just not a practical way to get to the commercial side in the front. But I think this is a healthy alternative to what could be. I like the buffers. Even considering the waivers that, staff denied, I think the applicant has done a really good job in trying to accommodate as much as possible to build something that's affordable and reasonable for this location. I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. And Commissioner Hool, back to you for one more question or comment.
Yeah, I just, and thank you for that insight, Commissioner Wright, on the needing to connect with the school board about the crosswalk.
It's the staff, not necessarily the board. It would,
Yeah,
it's the
the
staff.
school district
Yeah,
staff.
staff level.
Yeah. I am curious if the applicant could speak to the phasing of the project and/or if staff could speak to, when certain things would have to be completed. I'm most especially thinking, my understanding, I think, is they're going to start on the commercial side and work back. When does that fence or planted buffer get put in for Breckenridge? Would that have to be completed before people could start using those commercial facilities, or?
I mean, if the buffer remains as a condition, it would have to be completed before any of the units, whether commercial or residential, are approved for occupancy.
Okay, so before any COs are
Before any
issued.
COs, the
Okay.
buffer would need to be in.
And is that also true for any other amenities, or would that have to be specified? So like the path through, or the blueberry court and other plantings and all that?
The sidewalks that work their way back through the landor from the front would typically be expected to be completed in concert with those units. And really and truly, if phase one was purely the front two commercial buildings and the associated parking, and they were going to build that and bring those online before they ever started the quad in the very back of the property, and they never touched it, they never graded it, I think we would require the buffer to work in phases with it. We're not going to have them go back and intentionally grade an area they haven't graded yet to put in a fence when there's nothing on the other side of it yet. That would come with that phase before they could move into it.
Okay. But safe to say that nothing has to be put into a CDO to guarantee that the practical outcome we're all trying to seek is
Correct.
happening. Okay. And then I guess if I could just get some guidance, it sounds like the applicant is willing to help with some kind of proffered, potential amenity to help with traffic calming if needed, if identified by staff and residents, language on how we could go about that. Is that something that you could provide some guidance on, Attorney Drake or Director Griffin?
I mean, it would probably be, the best course of action on that, if you're looking to try to build something into a CDO, to require those things that have just been discussed regarding crosswalk. And the traffic calming to me is outside of the realm really of what you would condition them to provide, since there's no vehicular connection to landor. I think it's a stretch to ask them to pay for that. Certainly the crosswalk in Oglethorpe, if that's something, my recommendation would be to work with Tim Griffith, our traffic engineer, on appropriate language for the pedestrian crosswalk. And I'm sure Tim has been involved with the school district staff too, in terms of placement of that existing crosswalk, and could probably provide a great deal more information than I can.
Thank you.
We good? Okay. It's 8:15, but I'd like to suggest that we just push through for the final three. If anyone needs to take a break, go for it. So we're now moving on to this next presentation.
I'll move it along. 3321 and 31 Lexington Road, special use permit. This was part of an overall Lowe's special use permit many years ago. These were two retail out parcels. What is proposed here is a restaurant to go in. It is Whataburger, as you can see from your packet. This has been in staff's hands and with the Planning Commission for a number of months, trying to work through some design issues. A lot of those just inherent when you have a larger national chain trying to meet local code standards, and there was a lot of back and forth. We're of the opinion they've gotten it to a point where it really works pretty well on this property. You see the site here, it's the last out parcels in front of Lowe's. It is in proximity to the airport, and that's what drove the special use permit, was restaurant. within that distance of the airport. The overall plan here ultimately, and you can tell more by the drawings that follow in terms of your packet with the front facade, but for the longest time, this was moving through with its back turned to Lexington Road. The front door faced Lowe's, and the drive-through window was along the Lexington corridor. Planning Commission could not get their support behind that orientation and really pushed them to redesign it. So what we have now is they have flipped the building. They are able to put that double-loaded row of parking between the building and the street because they have cross-access to both to the east and west to the two existing Lowe's driveways, so that allows them to do that. So this would be the elevation facing Lexington. That's the rear that would face Lowe's. Planning Commission recommendation is to approve with condition, and that condition is there were some design requirements, and with a special use, if a developer or an applicant is seeking exceptions to design requirements, those are technically variances that have to specifically be requested and evaluated, and that did not occur. And so there are 5 of them here. If you see on the pink sheet, the Planning Commission recommendation was to waive the second one, which was the drive-through lane requirement. Technically, they can't waive a requirement as part of a special use like they could with a PD. So that one has to go back in, and we're going to have to work with the developer to make that happen. What that 92511 drive-through requirement is there is the requirement that you have an escape lane. So once you get in line at a drive-through, if something happens, if you change your mind, you can get out and you're not stuck until you work all the way through. We don't have one with the current design because they've got a double-loaded pickup. Not sure on the details, but I think we can get them where they need to be without any significant changes. They may have to modify their drive-through design a little bit. The rest of them are fairly minor. Maximum parking requirements is largely in part because we don't know how many employees they have yet. It may take care of itself. Correct labeling of elevation sheets is a simple correction, as well as the modification to the flagpole and the tree management plan. So we have been in contact with them. They've indicated they will leave this as a condition and address it during permitting when it goes to construction. But with that, the Planning Commission recommendation is to approve with that condition.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment? Okay, let's move back here. And Commissioner Davenport?
So the applicant decided, so I like the original design having the store facing Lexington Road. Who wants to see cars on the side of Lexington Road? It's already, can you explain to me can you explain why they want the building facing closer to Lowe's versus closer to Lexington Road?
Well, it's not so much that they did. They very much wanted it like you wanted.
Okay.
In terms of, let me show you. They wanted that facade facing Lexington. And then the parking lot, what you would see there is Lowe's would be behind
In the back.
Code doesn't allow that to occur. There are fenestration requirements and other things that, so what you would have seen from Lexington would have been 2 drive-through windows and a line of cars. And additional variances needed for that orientation. So staff with a special use, part of our criteria is to evaluate it to address code compliance issues. We were the ones that kept telling them to flip the building and face it to the street. That's where you've got the glass, even though it also comes with the parking lot in front of it.
We good? Commissioner Edwards?
I mean, I don't like it. I mean, I don't really like drive-throughs to begin with. This is right close to a major intersection. It's loaded with parking. I'm not going to support this.
Commissioner Hool?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I see that it's in District 2 now. Do we know what district this will be in January?
Do not off the top of my head, no.
Yours?
It'll be 3.
In 3, okay.
So confused.
I think it's a very old-world, auto-centric design, just not interested. No creativity here, nothing. It doesn't bring anything to us, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. Okay, let's
All right.
move on then to item 34. 33 was withdrawn as reviewed before, and we'll move on to 34.
Okay, 34 is a text amendment regarding, let's make sure I've got this language exactly right. It's the establishment of a new use, and this is one that we don't bring to you very often in terms of a text amendment. This is to place a new use in the zoning ordinance that is called a research and development use. This was scientific research and development, came to us from our economic development department. They have identified, kind of a gap in our current zoning ordinance, and a lot of this is based on, what we're seeing now with startup businesses and the ones that roll out of the university, and, they're kind of a research facility, but they're also doing a little bit of limited production of product too and growing. We don't have a good place to fit that in our code. We go all the way from administration and research, which allows the research part, but it doesn't allow any production of product on site, all the way up to light manufacturing, which is Johnson & Johnson by our definition, and that's not permitted in, for example, our employment office zone. It's not permitted with real small limitations. You can do it in EO, you can do it in some commercial zones, but it's like 1,000 feet or 1,500 feet is all you can do. And so what they ask, they prepared this for our consideration to take to the Planning Commission, and they're looking for a use that is that in-between use that allows primarily research, but it also allows you to provide a product and produce a product as you grow. And it offers an opportunity to put these uses in perhaps commercial general with a limitation that it can't be a large facility, but an empty storefront in a shopping center that's less than 10,000 feet may be an ideal startup place for one of these new institutions until they grow and get to a point where they're ready to move to their next round. RWDC is a great example of that. They went from a very, very small facility to where they are now out on Voiles Road. So we're very much in support of it. What this does, it would establish the definition in 9.2, and then it would place it in the use chart in both our employment zones as well as commercial general and commercial downtown, along with commercial rural with some limitations. And the recommendation from Planning Commission was to approve.
Thank you. Any public input? No, let's bring the discussion back here. Commissioner Hamby?
Sure, I'll say something, and certainly appreciate Director McConnell bringing this forward. I think it makes sense, and it's kind of a no-brainer to me, but it does open the door for some opportunities.
I agree.
We good? All right, then let's go on to our final item, which is the request for the amendment on the ordinances regarding accessory dwelling units.
All right, very good. Last item, and again, a little bit different in the form of a text amendment. 95% of the time, these text amendments, when they come to you, are either you requesting us to do it, to bring it back to you, or they are staff-generated coming out of the planning department. The last one was economic development. This is actually one that came from the mayor's working group on inclusionary zoning, as they have been working diligently through the last really 2 years or more. They had begun to work on accessory dwelling units in a more comprehensive manner. They were really looking, as our work program got adopted, to at least send forward for your consideration an amendment that could happen quickly, with the understanding that we need to amend our land use maps and we need to do our comprehensive planning and identify areas and then get back to that, and we talked about that last month. But so what they were looking for was what we oftentimes would refer to as low-hanging fruit, something that didn't stir up the ordinance a lot, that could bring forward and introduce a more streamlined approach to an accessory dwelling unit. And so that's what you have in front of you. There are a lot of sections that would change with this amendment in terms of just the text of the zoning ordinance. What this really does and all it really does, we currently allow what we call guest cottages to be built on these properties. Guest cottage can't have a kitchen. Kitchen means it can't have a stove. They've got a sink and they've got a small refrigerator, and we permit these all the time. This would allow those to go the next step and actually have a full kitchen in them. It's basically allowing an ADU to have a kitchen, to allow them to add an additional parking space if they want to or desire, but not required to, and then it limits them to one per property, but they're treated the same way that any other accessory structure is treated in terms of placement, in terms of, actually, it's a little more restrictive on size, because I think they're limited to 800 square feet, regardless of your lot size, and you can only have one of them. But other than that, if you want to build an artist studio, if you want to build an accessory dwelling and put a kitchen in it, if you want to build a guest cottage with no kitchen, from a permitting standpoint, they would all be treated the same way in terms of how big they can be and where they can go.
Let's take public comment first. Do we have any public comment on this? Please state your name.
Hi, I'm Alice Kinman, 457 Sunset Drive. I'm here tonight because I chair the working group that Brad just mentioned, and I just wanted to give you all a little bit of context on where, how our work process was, our thought process was. Brad really said a lot of it already, so I'm not going to take up too much time here, but I did want to emphasize that we're as a working group, we're charged to look for barriers in our code or our policies that might make producing a more variety of type of, more affordable housing for different levels. And one of the things that we saw after we got through with inclusionary zoning, which, thank you all, we've got that on the books now, we did see some, as Brad used the phrase, some low-hanging fruit here. Guest houses are already allowed, and really the only thing, Brad said they can't have a kitchen, but what that really means is they can't have a stove. They can have a refrigerator, they can have laundry facilities, they can have, and I would encourage you, go on Airbnb and look around. You'll see a bunch of these units already that are being used as short-term rentals. So what we realize is that if we could change the ordinance, as Brad said, keep everything the same except that you can put a cooktop in there, that we could create room for an additional type of housing without really changing much about how we already do business here. So these are essentially guest cottages with a stove. As you know, where we are right now with the housing shortage in Athens, it really affects everyone from the homeowner who's dealing with, high property taxes, high maintenance costs, inflation, et cetera, to the middle income worker who's pretty much shut out of the housing market right now, to, low wage workers who, need safe and affordable housing. So we felt like this is a good way to bring some very gentle density into our neighborhoods, with making a relatively small change. I will acknowledge that when we're talking about adding any kind of density, gentle or otherwise, to neighborhoods, issues of noise, traffic, the parking, those are going to be issues that we're going to have to deal with. I do think that with the proposal that you have in front of you tonight, we have addressed those things. However, speaking from our working group, we're very open to commissioner-defined options that might help us to mitigate those problems a bit more. Right now, we're asking for, you can put a parking space in, but you don't have to. That might be something that y'all want to think about. Right now, we are limiting the structures to 800 square feet. They can be, I'm out of time. I should know that better. I will be here while y'all discuss if you want to ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. Any other public comment? Okay, let's bring the discussion back here. Commissioner Link and then Commissioner Wright.
Yeah, I will be proposing a commission-defined option that I hope will address some of those concerns that I hear almost every week from constituents who live in, in-town, tightly packed neighborhoods that are being desperately impacted by student housing, particularly parking concerns. And, I've had multiple conversations with Matt Hall on the inclusionary zoning working group, and I had a great conversation with Alice Kinman this afternoon. I've spoken to Heather Benham, who's also on that group. They share these concerns and understand how, as this is written now, it could very much incentivize your typical student housing investor flippers to start buying up more properties and putting more of these in backyards. And because the single-family housing ordinance, and it could happen in any neighborhood, that single-family housing ordinance would apply to each structure rather than the whole property. So I'll be proposing that we just limit these to one-bedroom units, which are not necessarily as conducive to student housing. They're the kind of things where, it makes it easy to put grandma in the backyard and she can bake her cookies in her stove, in her oven. Or, you could put a couple or grad students, or even a single parent with a small child. It incentivizes it more for existing homeowners rather than investors and flippers who will just bring more student housing into neighborhoods and drive up the prices, because that's what's happening. These properties become more valuable when they're ideally suited for student housing. And, the whole idea of this ordinance is to make for more affordable housing for regular working class folks. And there is a real need for one-bedroom units. For regular working class folks, small, modest cottages that people can move into as little starter homes, or single moms, empty nester single moms can build that cottage in the backyard, move into that, and rent out their primary home. So I'll be proposing some language that will help us get the foot in the door for accessory dwelling units, but put those checks on it that will assure that it is a gentle way to bring density to our neighborhoods. And then I hope through that land use plan process that we'll be going through in the next year or two, we can look at these things on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis, on a zone by zone basis, and maybe loosen it up a little more for particular neighborhoods. But this at least allows you, any property right away to get that one-bedroom unit in.
Thank you, Commissioner Link. Commissioner Wright?
That was some good feedback, Melissa, with that, and I appreciate the hard work of the committee led by the former District 4 Commissioner, Alice Kinman. Thank you very much for your chairing that committee and the good work that you're doing and helping Brad summarize the point we're at with this. I believe that this is the kind of ordinance, as big and encompassing as it is, that is the type that needs a couple sessions on our cycle to get the community at large to realize what's being proposed. This is a big deal for the infill community in the neighborhoods that I represent. We've had a lot of struggles with the short-term rental activity, and it seems to me that by making the shift before the work coming out of government operations on short-term rentals is going to allow certain property owners to build their short-term rental unit in their backyard that's not allowed right now.
They already can.
And so there are some that are existing, but the limits that we have here, anyway, I just think it's the cart before the horse on that. I think that this fits in with some of the comments I made earlier about the comprehensive look of these changes instead of doing it one at a time, making sure that we're addressing short-term rentals at the same time or before we're adding people adding dwellings for that purpose. I just don't see that this option is going to help us with the people who are sleeping on the steps out here, the people who are sleeping in tents, people who are getting evicted. I think that it's an additional luxury in the backyard of somebody's house that can cause the concerns of the noise and the traffic and the parking that we've been hearing about, and it's a constituent concern that I want the constituency to be able to chime in on and know that this is happening, is in the works. Brad, I have a question. When you were talking about how this would, like right now, if somebody wants their, like you said, you give out the current accessory dwelling, if somebody wanted a 1,200 square foot one, could they do that? And that this is now limiting what size somebody could have a workshop without a kitchen?
This does not limit anything without a kitchen.
Okay.
As currently submitted to you. So if they wanted to do a workshop, it's still subject to the size restrictions built in
Okay.
that y'all worked on a few years ago.
Yeah.
Only if you want to do an accessory dwelling unit as we define it here with a kitchen in it, it limits it to 800 square feet regardless of your lot size. And
Okay.
you can have one,
Okay, so that's when that kicks in. So then you could have your workshop
potentially.
and one accessory, depending on
Depending on the size of
size
your
of
lot,
lot.
yes.
And making sure the other things.
And it does not restrict your ability to do other accessory structures within the overall size limitation. What it does restrict is we've also included guest cottage in the language that says an ADU can only be 800 square feet, and you can only have one of those, including a guest cottage too. So if you already have a cottage in your backyard with no kitchen, you can't get a permit to do a second one with a kitchen, or vice versa.
Gotcha, okay. And then the other part that this ordinance has repeated over and over again is that it's single-family it's a single-family zoning, single-family for the house, single-family for the accessory dwelling. But another thing that's was discussed or spoken of with the mayor and Commissioner Huell is wanting to change it to where you don't have any limits as far as addressing single-family definition, and if it's owner-occupied, that would not be a restriction. And if this is happening with a dwelling in the back, it would turn into an unlimited number of people. So again, I think that we should be moving these things forward together so that we know the totality of the effects of one on the other.
Manager Williams is asked to make a comment, and then we have Commissioner Huell, Commissioner Davenport, and Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And Commissioner Link contacted me as early as last Friday regarding CDO, and I appreciate you giving staff the weekend. I know Brad called you first thing Monday morning. And so just kind of getting a look at it, and I would share on behalf of staff our concerns about the initial text amendment as voted on by the group was pretty simple and affected some change. And I think you've added some complexity to it, in all fairness, perhaps well-intended, but I do echo the concerns that the potential consequences that we're not reviewing it with the public, and getting more public input. So I would say, and don't necessarily speak for Brad and Nikki, but we've had these conversations, the complexity might warrant some additional review and public comment.
Thank you. Commissioner Huell?
Yeah, like most code alterations we consider, this is not a cure-all. Even the big ones aren't a cure-all. It's a piece to the puzzle, but changes like this add up over time when we're trying to tackle a housing crisis, the scale that we're trying to tackle. This is not going to solve it for everyone, but it's going to play a small part, I think. I think it's going to play a useful part. Over time, maybe we get to a point where thoughtful developments don't need 20 waivers. I think we heard in the staff report, we heard this at the Planning Commission meeting for anyone who was attending or watched. We heard this from the chair of the committee that put this together. This is not big, it's low-hanging fruit, it's a small, minor tweak to code. Right now, units like this exist all over the community and they're primarily Airbnbs. This would actually allow those units to be housing for people who live here instead of Airbnbs, And so maybe we should think about the positive effects of that. And I guess I don't see the need for a CDO. I mean, the square footage is already so small that I don't see, how many bedrooms are you really going to cram into an 800 square foot structure, But I heard Commissioner Link speak to maybe a parent with a child. Well, if parents have a child, it's good to give the child their own room. So I don't know why we'd want to not allow parents to have a small home, where their kid can have their own room. It just seems like a silly, unnecessary addition to try to quell anxieties in the community that I think are often going to come up anytime we talk about code, but in this case, I don't think really match up to the reality that is likely to follow this sort of minor change to our code. So I hope we can just move forward with this thoughtfully considered, simple, small help to our big problem.
Commissioner Davenport.
Yeah, so I guess I'm thinking a little differently than my colleagues, but I get the fact that we need to provide more affordable housing and provide more housing stock, but if I was a developer and I saw that we're allowing kitchens, and even if it's just for 1 bedroom, 800 square foot, I'm thinking, I'm gonna buy this property, I'm gonna put an ADU behind it, because now I can, or if I'm just a homeowner, I can turn this into an Airbnb. We have too many, I don't want to say too many Airbnbs. I respect the people who are trying to make some money, but like I've heard nothing good about the ADUs from any constituents in District 1. So if they are out there who appreciates this, please let me know. Those are my bosses, but right now my bosses are telling me to not approve this. And the reason behind that is because I understand the fact of the additional off-street parking space is not required, but considering the addition of an ADU with a kitchen entices Airbnbs, entices more traffic, and some of these neighborhoods, you have a lot of people walking on streets. There are no sidewalks. I don't know. I would appreciate what the user group has done. Y'all done some excellent, awesome work. I'm just looking at the potential implications of passing this through. Airbnb, the increased traffic into neighborhoods. Code enforcement is already stretched thin as it is. This is going to turn into more of a problem, I believe, than it's going to become a solution to our affordable housing crisis.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards.
I wish we could just build new housing for cool townies who produce wonderful art and music, but that's impossible. Sometimes I wish I could live in a time capsule, but I live in a city, a dynamic environment that's always changing. And the change that I see here actually would discourage the use of an accessory dwelling unit as a short-term rental, because it would create a more long-term investment in it that might draw a more long-term tenant. So right now, we're allowing people to build accessory dwelling units. You just can't have a 220-volt plug in there. So folks are already doing it. Now, if you go to an Airbnb, yeah, all you need is a hot plate. You don't need a 220 dryer, 220 stovetop, 220 whatever. I mean, that's optimized for a short-term usage. So by making this small change and allowing people to have a stronger plug in their cottage, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people just are, maybe Mr. Griffith, might there be folks out there who, after the building inspection passes, just take a 220 out there anyway? That might happen, don't you think? I mean, it might just happen. You might just take a 220 from your fuse box and just put it out there. So we talk all day long about housing and the need for housing in this community. Here's an opportunity to allow for more housing. I support it.
Commissioner Hamby.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And, certainly a good discussion, and certainly recognizing that ADUs can currently be built. I might have a different opinion than Commissioner Edwards on the fact that people were buying houses in 5 Points and making them just Airbnbs. People are building houses in 5 Points and just making them Airbnbs. People would buy or build ADUs and make them just Airbnbs. So I'm trying to reconcile how we can manage that. I mean, people can do it now. How we can reconcile that with broadening the definition of ADUs to include a stove. I don't even use my stove, so I've been in this house for 12 years and haven't even turned it on. So I don't. The hot plate works good for me, but I just it's not an easy solution. But I think there's also a lot of things that we need to think about, and certainly in some of the neighborhoods I represent, and some that, of course, all of us represent. I think some input is warranted, and some discussion about this is warranted as well.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, it's my understanding, and I met with a constituent who bought a little 2-bedroom cottage off of Hancock and is adding an attached ADU to it. And this is an RM1 district. He's turned it into a 3-bedroom cottage with a attached ADU to 2-story, 1-bedroom ADU. And it's totally within the zoning and current code for that district because it's RM1. This would allow that to happen in any district with a detached ADU. And, you know, that might not happen commonly in Bogart or, you know, off of Jefferson Highway or even East Athens, but it's going to be highly, highly motivational for any neighborhood that's near campus that is desirable for student housing. Typically, students don't like to live in 1-bedroom units, but there are a hell of a lot of working folks out there who would happily and want to live in 1-bedroom units in these in-town neighborhoods who are increasingly being priced out of them. And the parking is such an issue. And I wish that we lived in a world where these students didn't bring their cars to Athens. I went through 5 years of college and my first year of grad school without owning a car. But that's not the case for the students at the University of Georgia, that most of them tend to be wealthy, and if your daddy gave you a BMW sports car for graduation, you're sure as hell going to bring it to Athens. Blocked, whose mailboxes are blocked, who the school bus couldn't get down Reese Street for a while there. I had a little old lady die inside her house on Rock Springs because a student housing developer bought the house next door and took over the shared driveway and then proceeded to develop the 2 1-bedroom shotgun shacks each into 3-bedroom units. So that entire backyard is full of cars, and then all the cars park on the street and on Reese Street, and we've had school buses not be able to get down the street. You know, some of these in-town neighborhoods were not built to accommodate that kind of car traffic. They were built at a time when most people didn't have cars. They don't have sidewalks. I am all for ADUs. In fact, I would like to build one in my backyard and one day retire to it and rent out my front house. I have plenty of constituents who would like to do the same thing. I have many friends my age who are, you know, in these 4-bedroom homes that they can't keep up with, but they don't want to sell because the market, they couldn't find a 1-bedroom house anywhere. So there are a lot of conditions where regular working class folks would certainly want to take advantage of this. There's also the financing aspect of it. When you have a 2-bedroom ADU, it doubles the profitability for it. And from what I understand, you're more like, a developer, an investor is more likely to get the financing to double the profitability of both those units by having your 2-bedroom ADU and your 2-bedroom front unit and in a single-family neighborhood. I want to see us, you know, families be able to put the guest cottage with the stove and the oven and the washer and dryer in their backyard and have grandma or a caregiver or rent it out or whatever. But we need to put some checks on it to just avoid what's already happening in Hancock and East Athens and parts of Five Points and East Cobham, and it's happening in parts of Boulevard too. We've got a couple streets on Boulevard where this creep is happening. And it's really, really hard to police the single-family housing ordinance, and as much as I don't like the single-family housing ordinance, it's the only tool we have right now to keep the student population from completely overtaking our in-town single-family neighborhoods. So I'm going to propose some parking requirements to assure that every single property that has an ADU has at least 2 on-site parking spaces, with an option to add an additional one, and that there's just that 1 bedroom. And as we go through that deeper process, I'm hoping we can open that up and recognize that there are plenty of places in town where larger multi-bedroom ADUs might be appropriate.
Thank you, Commissioner Link and Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you. I am curious where the short-term rental ordinance went off to. I was hoping it'd come in December.
We have a meeting next week.
Okay, I mean, I'm often hoping
Next Monday.
that these would come, simultaneously. I do think Commissioner Hamey made a good point. I mean, we don't want all this stuff to get grandfathered in and the horses out the barn. So, Commissioner Link, I think a lot of what you described as parking issues, 2 parking spots for 1 bedroom. We'll talk more about what you're proposing, but I just.
It's 2
I
parking
haven't
spots
seen
for
a
the
CD
whole
yeah, we
property,
have-
for
haven't
the 2
seen a CDL.
units.
Okay.
Yeah,
For both units.
for both what?
For both, it's 2 parking spaces for the whole property, which includes both units,
Okay, I mean, I
which
think
is
a lot
what's
of what you.
required for any single-family house right now.
I mean, I think a lot of what you're talking about is parking.
It is,
Parking.
and
More
that's the
cars,
biggest problem.
parking. Yeah, I get it. But we're talking about housing. We're talking about getting somebody a
Cars,
place to live. So if we got parking problems, let's talk about parking ordinances, parking requirement. All that stuff. But to me, it's different.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards, and Commissioner Hool, perhaps you can.
Yeah, I guess to me, it's pretty simple. We're taking a minor code amendment so that structures that already exist can become structures people can live in and maintain an address at, instead of be an Airbnb. And often Airbnbs are the more profitable thing. So, if we're worried that people are going to build something because of this to make an Airbnb, I feel like that's kind of missing the mark, So this is allowing structures to be used as residences in a community that is very much lacking residences. And I honestly, if you have a small little building that 1 or 2 or maybe 3, if it's parents with a kid, want to live in, I kind of don't care what they do with the rooms inside, and I kind of don't care whether they're attending school or not. I just want people in this community to have a place to live. And right now we don't have that. And there's so many kids going to school who don't have a place to live that they're filling up all the places that we would hope residents could stay in long-term without, options for people who are lower income. And there's so much Airbnb and Vrbo and short-term rental stuff happening that we have over 1,000 of those around the community, including in structures like this all over the community. This is a way to turn it into places people can actually live. It's a super minor amendment. I mean, this is one of the easiest things we can do to make a small dent in a big problem.
Can I say something, Commissioner?
Yes, we're going to have,
I'm
Commissioner, going to
ready
make
to go.
one, and maybe then you can make another amendment.
Well, no, I just want to say, if we could guarantee that they wouldn't be Airbnbs, that'd be all the more better, but we aren't at that point yet.
Yeah.
And I have no disagreement with what you just said, Commissioner Hool, but the fact is, we can't control whether or not somebody's going to turn it into a house or not at this point in time. I mean, so
Wonderful
that's it.
comment.
Thank
And
you.
perhaps you can make a motion.
Well,
Or
we're
do-
not
do
voting
you have
on
any-
it. We're not
No, a
voting on
motion to
anything.
adjourn.
Oh, motion to adjourn.
Is that we, by not doing this, we guarantee that it can't be housing. By
Motion-
doing this, we allow for it to potentially be housing, whereas right now, the only thing it can be is an Airbnb or someone living surreptitiously against the law.
Well made. Final point.
Motion to
And
adjourn.
more discussion afterwards. Motion from Mike Hamp to right, unanimous consent to adjourn. There we go. Another fun night at City Hall. Thank you all very much, and see you all on December 6th.